How did you turn your parents' punishment system against them when they needed you most? The ledger sat on the kitchen counter every Sunday morning, and my mother would call me down at exactly 7 a.m. to review my infractions for the week. She'd sit across from me with her reading glasses perched on her nose, running her finger down the columns she'd filled in with her perfect cursive handwriting. Monday, left your backpack in the hallway instead of your room. -5 points. Wednesday, forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer for dinner. -10 points. Friday, came home at 6:17 instead of 6 house. -15 points. She'd tally them up at the bottom, subtract from my starting balance of 100 points, and announce my privileges for the coming week. Below 50 points meant no phone. Below 30 meant no leaving the house except for school. Below 10 meant restricted meals and early bedtime. I was 17 years old and living in a prison disguised as a family home. The point system started when I was 13, right after my younger sister Lily was diagnosed with leukemia. My parents needed control over something, anything, because they couldn't control the cancer destroying their perfect daughter's perfect body. So they controlled me instead. At first it seemed reasonable, structured, a way to keep the household running while they spent days at the hospital with Lily. But reasonable became oppressive when Lily went into remission, and they kept the system anyway. 4 years later, I was still being graded on every breath I took, while Lily, now 11 and healthy, had 0 rules, 0 expectations, 0 consequences. She could leave dishes in the sink, forget homework, stay up until midnight watching videos on her tablet. My parents called it letting her be a kid after everything she'd been through. I called it favoritism, wrapped in medical justification. But I never said that out loud because questioning the system meant automatic 20-point deduction for disrespect. I kept my own ledger, hidden in a notebook I stored inside a hollowed-out textbook. Every punishment they gave me, I recorded with dates and details. Every time Lily got away with something that would have cost me points, I documented it. Every rule they enforced on me but not her, every double standard, every moment of hypocrisy. 4 years of data, hundreds of entries, undeniable patterns of systematic inequality. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but something told me I'd need proof someday. That someday came on a Saturday in March when my mother announced that my grandmother was moving in with us. Grandma Florence had dementia, couldn't live alone anymore, and my parents had decided we'd care for her at home instead of putting her in a facility. Noble, except my mother looked directly at me when she said, "We'll all need to pitch in and help." Translation: I would be doing the actual work while everyone else's lives continued unchanged. The expectations started immediately. I'd be responsible for Grandma Florence's meals, her medications 3 times daily, helping her dress and managing her care, keeping her company so she didn't wander. My mother worked full-time as a nurse, my father managed a warehouse, and Lily was too young for that kind of responsibility. I was 17 with a part-time job at a bookstore, honors classes, and college applications to finish, but apparently I had infinite time to be an unpaid caregiver. When I tried to discuss a schedule where everyone contributed, my father said, "This isn't a negotiation. Family takes care of family. You'll do what's needed or there will be consequences." He meant points. Everything was always about the points. I asked what I'd get in return. Extra privileges maybe, reduced restrictions. My mother actually laughed. "You'll get the satisfaction of helping your grandmother. That should be enough." Nothing was ever enough for them, except my complete submission. Grandma Florence moved in on a Sunday, and by Monday morning, I understood the real scope of what they'd volunteered me for. She woke up at 5 a.m., confused about where she was, calling for my grandfather, who'd been dead for 8 years. I had to calm her down, help her to the bathroom, get her settled, make her breakfast, crush her pills into applesauce because she wouldn't swallow them otherwise, all before getting myself ready for school. I was exhausted by 7:30 a.m. At school, I nearly fell asleep in calculus. My teacher, Mrs. Reeves, asked if everything was okay at home. I said yes automatically, because admitting the truth meant betraying family loyalty, which would cost me 50 points if my parents found out. But Mrs. Reeves looked at me with concern and said, "My office hours are Wednesdays after school if you need to talk." I filed that information away, not sure if I'd ever use it, but grateful someone had noticed I was drowning. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I'd been running on 5 hours of sleep per night, juggling school, work, Grandma Florence's care, and my regular household responsibilities. My grades started slipping. I got a B- on a chemistry test, my first B in 2 years. My mother saw the grade in the parent portal and deducted 30 points for not maintaining academic standards. I tried to explain that I was exhausted from taking care of Grandma Florence while working and studying, but she cut me off. "Everyone's tired. You don't hear us complaining. If you can't handle your responsibilities, maybe you need more structure, not less." More structure meant more restrictions, more punishments, more ways to fail their impossible standards. I went to my room and looked at my ledger. At 4 years of documented abuse disguised as discipline. Then I made a decision. If they wanted to use a point system to control me, I'd use their dependency on me to free myself. But I needed to wait for the right moment, the moment when they needed me so desperately they'd have no choice but to negotiate. That moment arrived 5 days later when my mother got called in for mandatory overtime at the hospital. 3 nurses had quit, the unit was understaffed, and she'd be working 12-hour shifts for at least 2 weeks. My father's warehouse was in the middle of inventory season, meaning he'd also be working extended hours. They called a family meeting Wednesday evening and explained the situation. My mother looked at me and said, "You'll need to take over more of Grandma Florence's care temporarily. We'll adjust expectations accordingly." I asked what adjustments they meant. She said, "We'll reduce your point deductions for minor infractions while we're shorthanded. Show some flexibility." Flexibility for them, more work for me, same pattern as always. I nodded and said I understood. But what I understood was that for the next 2 weeks, they'd be completely dependent on me. If I stopped functioning, their entire system collapsed. They'd miss work, lose income, face professional consequences, maybe even lose Grandma Florence to a nursing home they couldn't afford. I had leverage for the first time in 4 years. I just needed to use it strategically. I started documenting everything in detail. Grandma Florence needed assistance every 2 hours minimum. Meals, medications, bathroom support, companionship, redirecting when she got confused and tried to leave the house. I timed every task, logged every medication, photographed the schedule I was maintaining. I also started making mistakes, small ones at first. I'd give her lunch 15 minutes late and note it in my log. I'd forget to refill her water pitcher and document my forgetfulness. I'd let her wear the same shirt 2 days in a row and photograph it. Nothing dangerous, nothing that harmed her, but enough to show what happened when one person carried an unsustainable workload. After 3 days of this, my mother noticed Grandma Florence was wearing the same outfit. She asked why I hadn't changed her. I said I'd been so busy managing everything else that I forgot, then asked if she wanted to take over the clothing schedule. She snapped that she didn't have time and I needed to do better. I apologized and noted the interaction in my ledger. Proof she acknowledged the workload, but refused to adjust it. The weekend was brutal. My parents both worked Saturday and Sunday, 12-hour shifts, leaving me alone with Grandma Florence for 48 consecutive hours. No break, no backup, no help. Lily spent the weekend at her friend's house because she deserves fun after being stuck home all week. I spent the weekend managing medications, preparing meals I was too exhausted to eat, and watching my grandmother cry for people who no longer existed. By Sunday night, I could barely stand. My mother came home at 9 p.m., saw me collapsed on the couch, and asked if I'd finished my homework. I said no. I'd been busy keeping Grandma Florence alive all weekend. She deducted 20 points for attitude and told me to get my priorities straight. That's when something inside me cracked. Not broke, but cracked in a way that let something cold and calculating leak through. I went upstairs, pulled out my ledger, and started planning exactly how I'd use it. Monday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. when Grandma Florence started calling for help, but I didn't go to her room. I lay in bed listening to her confused, frightened voice echoing through the hallway. After 10 minutes, my mother burst into my room and demanded to know why I wasn't helping. I said I was too tired, that I'd been up until 1 a.m., finishing homework after caregiving all weekend, and I needed sleep. She said Grandma Florence needed me now. I said, "Then you help her. I'm not your employee. I'm your son, and I'm exhausted." She threatened to deduct 50 points. I said, "Go ahead. I'm already at 35 points. 50 more puts me at negative 15. What does that even mean? Are you going to ground me from breathing?" She stood there, opening and closing her mouth, then went to help Grandma Florence herself. She was late to work. I noted it in my ledger. The system was starting to crack. That afternoon, I went to Mrs. Reeves during her office hours. I brought my ledger, both the one my parents kept and the one I'd kept secretly. I showed her everything. 4 years of point deductions for minor infractions, 0 accountability for Lily, escalating demands with 0 compensation, and now essentially full-time unpaid caregiving while maintaining school and work obligations. She looked at the documentation with increasing alarm, then asked a question that changed everything. "Have you considered that this might be abuse? Not physical, but systematic emotional and psychological abuse?" I'd never used that word before. Abuse seemed too serious, too dramatic for what was happening to me. But seeing her face, seeing how she reacted to what I'd normalized, I realized she was right. This was abuse. Methodical, documented, justified with medical history and family values, but abuse nonetheless. She said, "I'm a mandatory reporter. What you're describing meets several criteria for child abuse and exploitation. I need to report this." I panicked and begged her not to. If CPS got involved, my parents would destroy me. Plus, I had a plan, a way to fix this myself. She hesitated, then made me promise to tell her if things got worse. I promised. The next breaking point came Thursday. My father's inventory was taking longer than expected, meaning his extended hours would continue another week. My mother's overtime was extended too. They called another family meeting and announced they'd need me to step up even more. I asked what more meant when I was already doing everything. My father said I'd need to cut back my bookstore hours to provide more care for Grandma Florence. I said no, just no, flat and final. The room went silent. My mother said, "Excuse me?" I repeated myself. I wasn't quitting my job. That income was for college applications, SAT prep courses, things I needed for my future. My father said my future could wait, family came first. I asked if Lily's future would wait. Could she skip her dance classes to help with Grandma Florence? My mother said Lily was too young. I pointed out I'd been younger than Lily when they started the point system. She said that was different. I asked how. She couldn't answer. I said, figure out another solution because I'm not quitting my job. My father stood up and told me I'd just earned a 100-point deduction. I said, I don't care about your points anymore. Then I went to my room and locked the door. They grounded me for a week. No phone, no leaving the house except school, no privileges at all. But they still needed me to care for Grandma Florence because they had no alternative. So I did the bare minimum, kept her safe and fed and medicated, but nothing extra. No companionship, no comfort, no going beyond basic survival needs. My grandmother noticed. She asked why I seemed angry. I told her I was tired, which was true. She said, your mother was always demanding. I tried to teach her differently, but she got it from her father. That comment stuck with me. The control, the punishment system, the impossible standards. My mother had learned it somewhere. Abuse cycles through generations until someone breaks it. Maybe I was that someone. Friday evening, my mother confronted me about doing the bare minimum with Grandma Florence. I said, you get what you pay for. You're paying me nothing, so you get nothing extra. She said family doesn't work for payment. I said, then family should volunteer, not enslave one person. She deducted another 50 points. I laughed in her face. Your points are meaningless. You need me more than I need your approval. Her expression shifted from anger to something else, uncertainty maybe, fear that her control was slipping. That weekend, both my parents worked again, and I implemented phase 2 of my plan. I documented everything obsessively, photographed every meal I prepared, every medication I administered, every task I completed, every moment I spent caregiving instead of living my own life. I timed everything with precision. Saturday alone, I spent 11 hours on direct care tasks. Sunday was worse, 13 hours because Grandma Florence had a bad day, confused and combative, needing constant supervision. By Sunday night, I had a comprehensive record of exactly how much labor I'd provided and how little support I'd received. Then I calculated costs. Home health care aides charged $30 per hour in our area. 11 hours Saturday at $30 was $330. 13 hours Sunday was $390. $720 for one weekend. I'd been doing this level of care for 4 weeks, plus my regular responsibilities. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of dollars of free labor they'd extracted from me while punishing me for not being perfect. Monday morning, I printed everything. My ledger showing 4 years of point deductions. Their ledger showing the same from their perspective. My documentation of Grandma Florence's care schedule. Photographs proving the workload. Cost calculations showing my labor's market value. I put it all in a folder and went to school. During lunch, I met with the school counselor, Mr. Kowalski, and showed him everything. He reviewed it carefully, then said what Mrs. Reeves had said, but more bluntly. This is exploitation. Your parents are using you as free labor while punishing you for being human. What do you want to do about it? I said I wanted to negotiate new terms. I wanted them to see exactly what they'd been doing and agree to change. He asked what happened if they refused. I said then I'd walk away, move in with a friend, let them figure out Grandma Florence's care themselves. He asked if I had somewhere to go. I admitted I didn't, not really, but I'd figure something out. He made a call, talked to someone quietly, then told me he'd be my backup plan if I needed one. His sister ran a shelter for teens in crisis situations. If things went bad, I had a place to go. That knowledge was armor. That evening, I requested a family meeting. My parents looked annoyed, but agreed. We sat in the living room, all 4 of us plus Grandma Florence watching television in the background. I placed my folder on the coffee table and said, we need to talk about the point system and my role in this family. My father sighed and said we'd been over this. I said, no, you've dictated and I've obeyed. Now I'm talking and you're listening. The authority in my voice surprised even me. I opened the folder and started with their ledger, reading entries aloud. Lost 10 points for leaving a glass in the living room. Lost 15 points for being 6 minutes late. Lost 20 points for questioning a rule. 4 years of petty tyranny documented in my mother's handwriting. Then I showed my ledger, the comparison. Same day, Lily left 4 glasses in the living room. 0 consequences. Same week, Lily came home 40 minutes late. 0 consequences. The pattern was undeniable. They tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I showed the care documentation, the photographs, the hour logs. Last weekend alone, I provided 13 hours of skilled care you'd pay $30 per hour for professionally. That's $390 in labor you extracted from me for free. My mother said I was being ridiculous. You can't put a price on family obligations. I said, you put a price on everything I do. You quantify my worth in points. I'm just using your logic. I pulled out the cost analysis, showing exactly how much my labor was worth over 4 weeks. Thousands of dollars they'd saved by exploiting me. My father said I was exaggerating, being dramatic. I asked if he wanted to hire a professional aide for a week to prove me wrong, see how much it cost, see how fast they'd go broke paying someone else to do what I did for nothing. He went quiet. Then I showed them my final document, a contract I'd written outlining new terms. Either they agreed to fair distribution of responsibilities, removal of the point system, and proper compensation for any caregiving beyond normal household contributions, or I'd stop participating entirely. My mother asked what I meant by stop participating. I said, I'll move out. Go stay somewhere else. You'll figure out Grandma Florence's care yourselves. Hire someone, split the duties, put her in a facility, I don't care. But I'm done being your servant. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's face went red, then purple. He stood up and shouted that I was being selfish and ungrateful, that after everything they'd done for me, providing a home and food and education, this was how I repaid them. I stood up too and said, everything you provided is legally required. You're supposed to feed and house and educate your children. That's baseline parenting, not something I owe you for. He said I was out of line. I said, no, you've been out of line for 4 years, and I'm finally saying so. My mother tried a different approach, guilt. She said Grandma Florence needed me, that I was abandoning a vulnerable person who depended on me. I said, you're abandoning her by refusing to provide adequate care. You're using me to avoid your own responsibilities. I love Grandma Florence, but I can't sacrifice my entire life because you won't step up. My mother started crying, real tears or manipulative ones. I couldn't tell anymore. She said we were a family. Families work together. I asked when Lily would start working. She said she was too young. I said, she's 11, old enough to do dishes, help with meals, spend time with Grandma Florence, but you won't ask her because she's your favorite and I'm your workhorse. That truth hung in the air, undeniable. Lily had been watching from the stairs, and she came down now looking confused and hurt. She said, is that true? Do you treat him different than me? My parents both started explaining about her illness, her recovery, needing to give her a normal childhood. Lily said, I've been better for 3 years. That's not an excuse anymore. Her voice was small but clear. She looked at me and said, I didn't know it was this bad. I thought you liked taking care of things. I told her I did at first when she was sick and everyone needed help. But they never stopped, never let me be a kid too, never applied the same rules to her. She went quiet, processing. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She picked up my contract from the coffee table and said, he's right. This is unfair. If he has to follow rules, I should too. If we need help with Grandma, I can help too. My mother tried to say she didn't need to worry about adult things, but she cut her off. I'm not a baby. Stop treating me different just because I was sick. It's making him hate us and making me feel bad. Out of the mouths of children, unwelcome truths. My father tried to take control back. He said we'd discuss this later when everyone was calmer, that decisions made in anger were bad decisions. I said, I'm not angry. I'm done. You have until Sunday to decide. Either we sign this contract with everyone's agreement, or I'm gone Monday morning. My mother asked where I'd go. I said I'd figured it out, which was partly true. Mr. Kowalski's sister's shelter was an option, not a good one, but an option. My father said I was bluffing. I looked him in the eyes and said, test me. See what happens when you lose the person holding this family together. Then I took my folder and went to my room. I heard them arguing downstairs for hours. Lily's voice occasionally cutting through, asking questions, pointing out inconsistencies. She'd become an unexpected ally. Around midnight, my mother knocked on my door. I didn't answer. She stood there for several minutes, then left. I heard her crying in their bedroom. Part of me felt guilty. The rest of me felt nothing but cold determination. They'd taught me consequences. Now they'd learn what consequences felt like. The next 3 days were tense. My parents didn't speak to me except when necessary. I continued Grandma Florence's care at the bare minimum level because abandoning her completely would make me as bad as them. But I did nothing extra. No cooking family meals, no cleaning common areas, no helping Lily with homework. Only what directly affected me or Grandma Florence. The house descended into chaos. Dishes piled up. Laundry overflowed. My father tried to cook dinner Wednesday night and burned it so badly the smoke alarm went off. My mother came home Thursday to find Lily struggling with homework because no one had helped her. They were getting a taste of what I did, what they'd taken for granted. Friday evening, my father asked to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, just us two. He looked exhausted, older somehow. He said, your mother and I have been discussing your terms. Some of what you said was harsh, but not wrong. We didn't realize how much we'd put on you. I waited for the but. He continued, we're willing to make changes. The point system is done, effective immediately. We'll create a fair chore rotation that includes everyone. But the caregiving situation is complicated. We can't afford professional care, and we can't put Florence in a home. We need you to keep helping, at least until we figure something else out. I asked what I'd get in return for continued caregiving. He looked uncomfortable, then said they'd pay me. Not $30 an hour? They couldn't afford that. But $15 for any care hours beyond 2 per day. 2 hours was my fair share as a family member. Anything beyond that was paid work. I calculated quickly. Most days I did 6 to 8 hours of care. That meant 4 to 6 paid hours daily, $60 to $90 a day, $420 to $630 weekly. Real money, college money, future money. I asked about scheduling. He said they'd work with me around school and my bookstore job. My needs would be considered, not dismissed. I asked about Lily's involvement. He said Lily would start contributing age-appropriate help, spending time with Florence, learning basic care tasks. Everyone would participate. I asked what happened if they backslid, started the point system again under a different name, started piling responsibilities back on me. He said, "Then you leave and we'll deserve it. I'm not asking you to trust us. I'm asking you to let us prove we can change." That was more honest than anything he'd said in years. I told him I needed to see it in writing, notarized, a real contract they couldn't break without legal consequences. He agreed. Saturday morning, we went to a notary public. My parents, Lily, and me. I'd revised my contract based on our conversation, spelling out exact terms. No point system. Fair distribution of household responsibilities with a posted rotating schedule. Compensation of $15 per hour for caregiving beyond 2 hours daily, paid weekly. My school and work schedule took priority over family demands. Regular family meetings to discuss issues before they became crises. If they violated terms, I could leave without being pursued or guilt-tripped. Both parents would attend family counseling with me for 3 months to address underlying issues. Lily would begin contributing age-appropriate chores and spending time with Grandma Florence. Everything specific, everything enforceable, everything designed to prevent backsliding. The notary read it over and asked if everyone understood and agreed. My parents both said yes. Lily said yes. I signed. They signed. The notary stamped it. Legal and binding, a contract turning their punishment system into something fair, something equal, something that acknowledged my humanity. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter than I had in 4 years. Not happy yet, but hopeful. Change was possible if you fought for it strategically. The next months were adjustment. My parents struggled with sharing responsibilities they'd dumped on me for years. My father burned dinner regularly before getting better at cooking. My mother forgot Grandma Florence's medication twice, learned how hard it was to remember everything. Lily surprised everyone by being good with our grandmother, patient and gentle, sitting with her for hours telling her about school and dance. She didn't always remember who Lily was, but she smiled when my sister visited. The family counseling was awkward and painful. Our therapist, Dr. Marin, called them out on things they'd normalized. She used words like emotional abuse and exploitation and parentification. My mother cried a lot. My father got defensive. But slowly, session by session, they started acknowledging what they'd done, started apologizing, not just with words, but with changed behavior. The point system never came back. The ledger disappeared. They started asking about my day, my interests, things beyond what I could do for them. It felt strange being seen as a person instead of a resource. Strange, but good. My compensation for caregiving added up quickly. Within 2 months, I'd saved enough for all my college application fees and SAT prep. Within 4 months, I had a real college fund building. My mother commented once that I was getting rich off family obligations. I reminded her those hours were beyond my fair share, and that she'd agreed to the terms in a legal contract. She dropped it. The money was more than financial, though. It was validation. Proof my work had value. Proof I wasn't crazy for feeling exploited. Every paycheck was evidence they'd been wrong, and I'd been right. Lily started questioning other things too, asking why certain rules existed, whether they made sense. She'd learned from watching me that authority could be challenged, that speaking up was possible. My parents handled her questions better than they'd handled mine, maybe because they'd learned, maybe because they couldn't afford to lose another child's respect. Either way, the family dynamic shifted. We weren't perfect, but we were functional. We talked instead of demanded, negotiated instead of dictated, respected boundaries instead of steamrolling them. Grandma Florence's condition gradually worsened, despite good care. A year after moving in, she stopped recognizing most of us. She lived in fragments of memory, sometimes lucid, mostly confused, always needing help. But the burden was shared now. My parents hired a part-time aide for weekday mornings, giving everyone breaks. They took turns with evening care. Lily helped with small things. I still did more than anyone, but it felt manageable because it wasn't everything, because I had space to breathe, because my contributions were acknowledged and compensated. When she died 18 months after moving in, peacefully in her sleep, I cried for her and for the family we might have been all along if my parents had learned earlier what took a crisis to teach them. At the funeral, my mother hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us, for fighting instead of leaving. You saved this family." I didn't say what I was thinking, that I'd almost destroyed it to save myself, that I'd been willing to walk away completely, that they'd gotten lucky. I chose strategic rebellion over scorched earth. College applications came and went. I got into my top choice with a partial scholarship. The rest I'd cover with my caregiving savings, student loans, and work study. My parents offered to help with what they could, a gesture that meant more than the money itself. They'd never offered before, assuming I'd figure it out alone. Lily hugged me when I got my acceptance letter and said, "I'm going to miss you, but I'm glad you're getting out." She understood something I hadn't at 11, that leaving wasn't betrayal, it was survival. I told her to remember that when her time came, to never let anyone make her feel guilty for prioritizing her own life. She promised she would. The night before I left for college, my father asked to talk. We sat on the back porch, where I'd spent so many evenings too exhausted to move. He said, "I need you to know something. What we did to you was wrong. The point system, the exploitation, treating you like a servant instead of a son. There's no excuse. Your mother and I were drowning, and we made you our lifeboat without asking if you could swim. I'm sorry. I'm sorry it took you threatening to leave for us to see it. I'm sorry you had to fight so hard for basic respect. You deserved better." His voice broke. I'd never heard him cry before. I told him I accepted his apology, but I'd never forget what happened. That trust was built through consistent action, not words. He nodded and said he'd spend the rest of his life proving he'd changed. I said that was all I could ask. Move-in day was chaotic and emotional. My parents helped carry boxes to my dorm room, both of them crying when they left. Lily made me promise to call every week. I set up my small space, this room that was mine alone, and felt something settle inside me. Freedom had a specific feeling, and it felt like a dorm room with a door I could lock and space no one could invade. That first night, alone and independent, I pulled out my old ledger, the one I'd kept hidden for years. I read through entries documenting pain and injustice and systematic abuse. Then I tore it into pieces and threw it away. I didn't need it anymore. The past was documented, acknowledged, and resolved. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. I'd fought my parents' punishment system by using their own logic against them, by documenting everything they did to me and forcing them to see what they'd normalized. I'd turned their need for my labor into leverage, their crisis into my opportunity for justice. Some might call it manipulation. I call it survival. I call it learning to speak the only language they understood. I call it refusing to be broken by people who should have protected me. And in the end, everyone was better for it. My parents learned accountability. Lily learned to question authority. Grandma Florence got better care. And I learned that sometimes the only way out is through, that sometimes you have to weaponize the system against itself before the system will change. 4 years of punishment taught me that consequences cut both ways. They just never expected me to make them feel it too. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.